Cancel, who curated the exhibition. A fixture in the New York City art world, covering 40-odd years of dedication and collaboration. We all know he was part of our group, Taller Boricua. Later on, he became director of the Bronx Museum. Helped the Bronx Museum get off the ground into what it became an institution. And without further ado, I want to pass it over to Luis Cancel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marcos. As Marcos indicated, my involvement with Taller Boricua goes back to my, early emergence as a visual artist. We were all part of the same community, learning to be artists, learning to be creative people, learning to be how to bring our art into the world, learning about our cultural history, and fighting to gain opportunities to be able to exhibit our work in all sorts of institutions. So I always feel very, a deep kinship and a debt of gratitude to people like the founders of Taller Boricua, which include Carlos Osorio and Rafael Tufiño, along with, a whole generation of New York artists and Latino artists that they came together to fight for those opportunities. And one of those early founders as well is Nitza Tufiño, and Nitza's here with us today, and a direct lineage and connection between New York and the New York Latino cultural scene and Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. So Nitza, thank you for being here. And as I mentioned earlier when we talked about when we opened this exhibition, one of the long-standing pillars and supporters of this organization, Fernando Salicruz, I wanted to thank him, and we have to thank him in absentia and in spirit, because we lost this great artist a year ago. And but it was Fernando who I initially approached with Paulo's work.
Yes.
And presented a portfolio and presented the idea, and we talked about the idea of bringing this young Brazilian photographer to New York and having him exhibit here. And Fernando really in true Taller Boricua fashion opened the doors, and was extremely welcoming. And so we have to thank not only the existing leadership that's still with us from Taller, but Fernando Salicruz, who really, this is one of his legacy projects. So Fernando, wherever you are, brother, we love you.
True.
We love you.
Yes.
The other person I wanted to acknowledge is that I became aware of Paulo's work in Rio de Janeiro at an event that has been founded by my wife, Regina Miranda. And so she created an initiative called Cidade Creativa, Transformações Culturais, Creative City, Cultural Transformations. And it's a 10-year project that's taking place in Rio de Janeiro. And in one of the early international forums that is annually organized by Cidade Creativa, Paulo's work was exhibited. And I got to see his work. And from that moment on, we entered into a dialogue and we stayed in touch. And then the idea of an exhibition began to grow. And I'm happy to say that, with all the support that Paulo was able to secure from what's the name of the company? Santa Lucia. Santa Lucia and other Brazilian patrons. This is actually the first sort of international project that Cidade Creativa has undertaken. So very often, Regina is very busy traveling around the world, but she happens to be here today, so I want to take a moment to ask you to thank Regina. Thank you. And to wrap up my thank yous before we get started with this conversation, I want to thank Paulo Fabre, because Paulo Yes. You know, it's a very, very difficult thing to ask anyone, but it's, you know, an artist, to like have faith in somebody else's eye, right? And have an outsider view their work and stand in judgment of their work to a certain extent. And Paulo took that leap of faith early on in our working relationship and allowed me to go through literally thousands of images over the course that he has photographed over the course of these in recent years. And slowly but surely, we started to pull together things that whittle it down to a couple hundred images, right? And then I saw patterns began to emerge for me, and he's a photographer that works both in black and white and in color. So there's a whole genre of color work that got left out. And this was it was hard for him to deal with that initially, but he had the faith and the trust to work with me and said, okay, we've made it, we've hit that fork in the road, now we're going to only go down the black and white path. And after a series of different, selection rounds and so forth, I began to see a kind of a more definitive pattern. Because as a curator, you really want to help an audience to understand the work of an artist. And he is one that's traveled around the world. He's been documenting, and as you can see from this exhibition, you're looking at images from South America, from different parts of South America, from Europe and New York. And slowly but surely, a kind of theme began to emerge, and in our conversations, and we sort of settle on a kind of an affinity with what's called traditionally street photography. And I wanted to share with you a quote from Timothy Gleason, who defines street photography in the following way. Quote, "Street photographs are mirror images of society displaying unmanipulated scenes with usually unaware subjects." End of quote. So as we whittled down our selection, I began to see a whole pattern of images where Paulo, as a photographer, was very furtively and quickly capturing images. And I saw a kind of a great affinity with one of the early pioneers of this kind of photography of instant capturing and quick eye. It's almost like, as we as Paulo has described, if you get a chance to download the catalog, which is available for free online, it's a PDF, and then it's designed to work on a iPad or any tablet. And one of the quotes that is in there, he talks about being a shark, like the way that a shark moves through the water and strikes quickly and captures its prey. And this kind of, and the other thing he says about the shark is that the shark has to keep moving or it dies, right? It's like, if he doesn't keep moving, get that water flowing through the gills, he's not going to be able to breathe. He's going to go extinct. So, to a certain extent, Paulo has described for me this kind of mindset. And when you look at some of the images, you get the sense of, especially this room has more of the furtive quality. It's kind of like the people are totally unaware that they're being photographed. And in some of the other gallery, there are images where literally a fraction of a second before or after, the image wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be the same thing. And so there's this strong relationship and affinity with Andre Cortez, for instance, as a photographer who really excelled at capturing these kind of fleeting moments. Just for the record, because I know we're being recorded, in the other room, there's one of the earliest photographs in this exhibition. It's called Supermind. And Supermind is an image that has various layers of images they're basically created through reflection. Okay, they're different images, but it's one shot. It's no manipulation of anything. And what really ties it all together is this fleeting shadow portrait that enters the frame in a fleeting second. And the backstory of that was that Paulo had seen, this image, had kind of imagined what it might look like if some shadows were on it, but he had turned his back. He was about to cross the street when he saw that somebody was coming down the hill. So then he decided, okay, well, this is my chance. And so he quickly turned and made sure that the person didn't appear in the frame, only the shadow appeared in the frame. And so this kind of super quick, unmanipulated scenes where the subjects are unaware, just like Timothy Gleason describes of street photography, kind of epitomizes the work that we're going to be talking about here. Now, Paulo is a native of Santa Catarina. He lives in Sao Paulo, lived briefly in Rio de Janeiro, but mostly is associated with Sao Paulo. He's not a native English speaker, but he's going to do his best to speak in English. And one of the things, I wanted to reassure Paulo that if you feel at a loss, you can say it in Portuguese. We have several Portuguese-speaking people here that can help to translate. So, the format I'd like to follow is that Paulo's now going to speak for a little bit. Then I have a series of questions that I want to ask him, and then we'll open it to questions from everybody here. Okay? So, Paulo Fabre.
Thank you. So, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Taller Boricua, for giving to me this first opportunity to come here to New York and present my photographs. Luis mentioned it, Fernando Salicorp. Fernando really was the first one from this community that looked into my pictures and saw something. And I'd like to thank you for the space, for the gallery, for the support, for everything. Nitsa, Marcos Dimas, and Willie and Jay. We worked very hard to put those photographs on the wall, and it was like a teamwork. So I'm very happy with work with you. I'd like to thank to some supporters in Brazil that made this possible. They aren't here, but I'd like to thank you. To Santa Luzia Frames, to Canson Paper, and to the studio that turned these beautiful photographs in amazing prints. The people from Kelly Polato, they really did a great job. I also like to thank to my family that are not here, but I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to say that Regina Miranda was a very important people. She put this first brick and start a relationship with Luis in 2011. I was living in Rio at that time. I have a business background, and at that time I used to work for a big company in Rio de Janeiro, and I decided to quit and follow my heart. And I was living in Rio at that time, and she said, wait 1 more week, and met my husband Luis. Then you have time, you will begin a conversation and trust me and wait. And I did, and here I am. So thank you, Regina. And you missed the opening, by the way, but a drink is okay. Okay, okay. A drink later is okay for that cocktail. And at least, but also important, I'd like to thank Luis for his trust in my work. I remember that first time that he came to my place in São Paulo, and he took a bus from Rio, and I took him at the subway station near my house, and we went to my place. We had a breakfast, and then we started to work till late of afternoon, and he saw every image that I have. And at the time I wanted to show him not only the best for me, and he said, no, I want to see everything. And at that moment I saw that he is a generous guy, and he was worried in make a good job. So thank you for your eye and for your trust in me. And it was not a easy job. Now the photographs are hanging on the walls, and we can look into that and see, it's beautiful, it's okay. But to come from 1,000 then to 100, and then to 100 to this 21 photographs was a huge job and a hard job. And sometimes I try to make it harder for Luis to test in him. And I said more, Luis, take a look at these color photographs. Because, no, maybe in color, but not. And I sent him a PDF or uploaded on WeTransfer like 50 or 60 photographs, totally different. And he was very patient, and he did a good work as a curator. And I see that photography nowadays is running to a photographer is not more than just a photographer. Photographer has to curate, has to be a curator, has to be a printer, and has to be. And I don't know. For me, I want to follow my heart and photograph. Take my camera with me all the time, travel, and choose some photographs, editing. And I'm very happy to trust in a curator that I can say, Luis, now it's your time, do it. It's very good to work with people like Luis. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. So can I ask you your first question?
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So please be gentle with me.
So here's a softball pitch. So, in your biography, you acknowledge a Brazilian photographer named Carlos Moreira.
Yes.
And, we haven't really talked much about him. I'd like to hear in your own words, what role did Carlos Moreira play in your development, and stylistically, what did you find interesting about his work, etc.?
Well, before Carlos Moreira, I have a great friend of mine that would be a pleasure to be here. His name is William. And I used to work in that company, and I started to photograph. And when you start to photograph, it's like fishing. You take a small fish and you think that it is a big fish. And as a photographer, I used to come with these small fish, thinking that was big fishes. And I showed to William, oh, look at this fish, look at beautiful. And he said, this is bullshit, this is a small fish. And he told me at that period that my photograph had potential, but I was being mediocre, and I should study. And I looked to him and I said, okay, you're right. I'm supposing to be a big fisherman, but I'm not. I trust in you. So what can I study? Because at that time, I'm a self-taught photographer in the way of camera setting stuff. And he introduced me to Carlos Moreira, that is a master photographer, and more than a master, he is more than a photographer, he is a artist. And I started to study with Carlos Moreira at that time. And Carlos introduced me to the great photographers, to the masters like André Kertész, like Cartier-Bresson, like Eugene Auger, Robert Frank, and these big names. And Carlos is the kind of guy, very kind, that never say to you, this photograph is ugly, or it's not such a good composition. He said to you, I love the way that you manage with light. And I started thinking, yeah, Carlos always says to me that he likes the way that I manage with the light. And he doesn't say nothing when I show to him something that doesn't have light, this kind of light and shadow. So I think that Carlos is right. I should do more light, shadows, black and white. And then when I traveled to Bolivia and Atacama, and I brought to him this photograph here, he looked into this photograph and say, this is such a beautiful image. And I see more than an image. I see a path. And at that time, when I did that travel to Bolivia, and I took this photograph, I was very indeciso, como digo?
Undecided.
Undecided about my career, about my job, about my. I was supposed to be an executive, marketing executive, and I decided to quit. Of course, it took a long time, 1 year more. But I decided at that time that I would follow a different path in my life. And when Carlos looked at this photograph, he saw that. He doesn't say to me, but he saw that. And I could see in his eyes that he was seeing a different path for me. So Carlos was very important in this way, to help me to find a different path in my life and find my way as a photographer.
And I know that when we've talked about his influence with you and so forth, he didn't just show you about photography. I mean, photographers, the great photographers that you've mentioned, Kertész, Frank, Bresson, Auger.
Yes.
He also talked about painting.
Yeah.
And you have said, actually, in conversations with me, that you actually look more at the work of painters than you do the work of photographers. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, of course. This picture here, where Carlos was like a magician. He is perfect. And when we were talking about this photograph, he said to someone in the audience and say, you are seeing that book, the green book on the shelf? Please take that for me and open on the page 26. It was a Bruegel
Bruegels. Painting?
painting. And the way that Bruegels used to paint the image, the human body on his work is very similar how the human body is represented on this picture. And Carlos has this power. He can see an image and can connect to many and many other works, even photography and paintings. And I started to look to painters' crafts to understand how they manage with the light. And the one that I most like is Edward Hopper. And there's a quote from Hopper that he says that he only wants to paint the light, the sunlight on a house. And this is very true for me, because when I took a picture like that in MoMA or like that in 60th Avenue, or even that ones on the beach, on the desert, on the city, first I saw the light, and I set up my camera for the light, for where the light is, and then everything happens. So I started to study and go through painters' books to understand how they manage the light. So this is very important to me.
You mentioned, because that's one of the things that, as patterns emerged, as I looked at all of these hundreds and thousands of photographs, was this play with shadows, this play with light. And when in the other room, there are these two images. One of them is on a beach in Rio de Janeiro,
Yes.
with a couple on the sand, and then the shadows of people on the boardwalk kind of jutting into the image and in their direction, kind of pointing at this couple that's on the sand, that was oblivious to what's going on around them, and certainly oblivious to the photographer who's taking the picture. But I saw a moment where it's almost like symbolically there's danger, or there's a threat, or there's this instability, and it's all created by the shadows, and none of that really existed. There was nobody threatening them, but this emotional landscape that I know corresponded with what was going on in Paulo's life at that time. He had a breakup in a relationship, so he wasn't feeling really happy, so to speak, when he took that photograph. Now, I wanted you to talk a little bit about this conflict of having to decide, this very big decision of having to decide to turn your back on a successful marketing career and embrace the uncertainty of being a creative photographer. How was that? Going to Rio was part of that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then after Rio, you made another big decision to come to New York.
Yeah.
Could you explain your mindset and your motivation?
Sure. When I moved to Rio in 2010, a few months after this travel to Bolivia and Atacama Desert, I was motivated for a relationship with a woman that lived in Rio, and I felt at that moment, I can't explain exactly what, but I felt that something different, or something not wrong, but something that was like a turning, like a desvio, like
Desvio na vida, desvio
no caminho,
no caminho.
A long way,
It was like the wrong path.
not the wrong path, but the long path. Yeah, A detour. Thank you. It was it was a detour that I have to follow because I was following my heart, and there's a big confrontation about heart and mind. Yeah, it's too much information. And at that time, I suppose that I was trying to lie to myself that Rio would be great, and my photography that would have a booming, because Rio is cidade maravilhosa, is beautiful, the most beautiful city in the world. In fact, it is one of those, but it's very difficult to photograph in Rio because everything in Rio was well photographed before. And by day, the harsh light and the heat crushed me down, and at night was a little bit dangerous. And then I become to photograph almost at the sunset, not on the twilight, but on the sunset, because the shadows are longer. And I developed in Rio because I had few hours to photograph, and it was dangerous. So I developed my way of photograph, hiding the camera here, and being very quick. And I moved very fast, the shark attack. And I moved very fast and all the time, because if I stand to photograph, I could lose my camera or something more. And in the other side, my relationship was, I was seeing the end of the relationship. So it was a lot of confrontations. And I didn't like my work. I was unhappy in relationship. I was not so happy with my photography in Rio. What I'm doing here? And then everything, it was like a trigger for what happened before. Then I moved to New York.
So that kind of really focused your mind and helped to propel you in the direction of coming to New York for a period of time.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm going to start to open it up for questions. I have a couple more questions, but if you feel that you have a question, you want to follow up something, feel free to just raise your hand. I'll call on you. Anybody feel motivated yet? Yes.
How long were you in New York when you came here?
3 months on the winter.
Well, what I love about your work, we'll just talk about New York. You seem like you're from here, and all your imagery feels like you're just adapted to the place that you're in. It's something very familiar with you. So, I mean, if I saw this, I would never think you were from a different country. Here, the same thing. There was a beautiful show at the Museo, the Gabriel Figueroa, which had all those wonderful, the black, these incredible scenic imagery. It's almost cinematography.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a. So I mean, you just have a wonderful sensibility with your subject matter and with yourself. And the black and white is. I mean, I look at this piece here, and it feels like it's a print. I don't feel it's a photograph. It's almost like looking at a lithograph of some sort. And even this, I mean, well, here I'm just curious. Did you manipulate? You just take the pictures, or do you work on them also? Because to have the sky, to read so well. I mean, you could take a wonderful picture, but you don't see that sky sometimes. You might have to manipulate.
Yeah.
Are these manipulated in any way?
What I do on the computer is the same that the old-fashioned photographers used to do on the
We all do
With the
colors.
negative.
Yeah.
the negative
Yeah.
on the dark room.
Right.
I bring back the blacks and I push forward the whites.
Beautiful.
That's it. Yeah, but what you said is a big compliment to me because sometimes I can't say with words exactly what you said. So thank
Well,
you.
I came to see the show. Marcus was kind enough to open it up early for us. And I said, oh my God, I have to come back. I have to meet this artist. Really. Thank you, Luis, for bringing this terrific show here.
Thank you.
So Paulo, a question
impressive.
about, thank you.
Very impressive. It's small, but it's very intense.
So Paulo, so you made the decision to come to New York. You were here for a 3-month period. Walk us through your process. You know, like I know, for instance, that one of my favorite images, which is in the other room, which is called Central Park, is one of the first ones, one of the early images of your stay here. And can you tell me about your mindset and what were the circumstances of capturing that image?
Well, when I came here to New York in 2012, it was my first time in New York. I never have been here before, even in United States. It was my first time. And when I arrived here, and of course that I wanted to know Times Square and Empire State Building, okay, just tourist sites. But what really interests me was the New Yorker life. And I started to figure that out. Wow, how such amazing is this New Yorker, those New Yorkers. And it's something, some light inside me was acesa. Como diz? Was acesa. Lit. Was lit. Yeah.
Ignited.
Yeah, ignited. And I started to follow this lifestyle. And for me, what is very incredible in this city, what I really like is the way that people, that New Yorkers and visitors, deal with the city, the parks, the public, the streets. And at that time, I began to study at ICP, and there was a class over there called Finding Your Voice as a Photographer with a great photographer that is Joyce George. And the first picture that I brought to her was a color photograph of a yellow cab. And she looked at me and said, "Why you foreigners like yellow cabs?" And this is like yellow cabs. They look to yellow cabs all the time. So she's right. And then I start to look for something different than yellow cabs. And the time was winter, and the light on the winter for me is the best because it's softener. There's an amazing angle. What turns the shadows very long, and the New Yorkers are very, very harsh, on the winter. And I love winter. I love cold. For me, the sensation of the wind, the cold wind in my face is like I'm free, I'm alive. And I photograph 8-9 hours a day those days, walking and walking and walking. And I was very happy, and I could turn my questions, my contradictions, my beliefs in photographs. I was alone here, and then I started to make some friends. One of these good friends is here, Wasim, and I started to see the city not as a New Yorker, but different than a foreigner. So I took some pieces of the city for me, and I could turn those pieces into photographs. Back to your question. This photograph in Central Park, for me, I was walking, and I walked a lot, and I was looking for these shadows on the trees and the formats that the trees arrange. And then I saw a girl almost hiding on the trees. And I felt her loneliness. And I was alone. It's not about lonely, it's about solitude. And because I was alone here, but I was happy. So it's not about loneliness. Solitude is a word that fits better. And then I took this photograph because it was exactly the way that I felt at the time, solitude.
And one of the street photographers that you got to see quite a bit of his work when you were in New York is an American photographer called Ouija. That's the nickname for a photojournalist worked in the 40s and 50s here in New York City, who actually earned his livelihood by being like one of the first photographers to get to a crime scene, but you know, Ouija wasn't defined just by that. But he also captured the nightlife of the city and other kind of fleeting moments. And you have indicated that you kind of you actually enjoyed learning a lot more about Ouija. You want to talk about Ouija and your views on him?
Yeah, when I was in New York at that winter, and I came here to study at ICP. ICP was doing homenagem.
A tribute exhibition.
A tribute exhibition to this photographer, Ouija, that I had studied in Brazil before. With Carlos Moreira, and of course I was interested in him, but was not my main photographer, the one of that I most like. And then I started to see his photographs, his works, his books, and I really loved the way that he managed it with the light. Even he photographing with flash, what I don't use in the most photographies. Sometimes I use when I will make a portrait, but on street I never use the flashlight. And he used flash, the speed graphic machines, cameras,
right?
And but even using flash, his light is amazing, and he had this shark attack style. He was fast. He was quick. He could feel the presence of blood, literally, and I like that. I like to be the first to see something, because I know that this moment won't happen anymore. And on a fraction of a second, it will disappear. So this style, not even the noir style of his photograph, but this style of photograph being very fast and quick, I like, and it inspired me. And when I was in Rio, walking and working on the streets of Lapa at night, being very fast to photograph, if not, my camera would be stolen, and I learned something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, And I realized that I needed to be faster than the thieves. And sometimes I took photographs of people that came behind me and say, "Why did you took this picture of me?" I said, because I want. You were there, but no, let me see. And at that time I used film, and I said, "You can't see. This is film. This is camera." "Oh, okay. Well, give me your email, then I send to you after." Okay, I make some friends.
Great. I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone that's joined us here who is really a staunch supporter of the arts and culture of the city. She has been a big supporter of my work and efforts over the years, and a great public servant. So if we can just ask our board president, Gail Brewer, to stand up a second. Gail, did you want to say a few words? Or?
Much more interested up front.
Okay. But thank you for joining us today, coming to Taller Boricua.
Thank you.
So, Paulo,
Yes.
you then after your visit, your stay in New York, almost in the same year, you went on to go to Paris. And how would you contrast, your activity in New York versus your activity in Paris? Or did you feel you were already found a path that you were implementing in that city, like you did in New York?
Yes. When I studied Cartier-Bresson's work, I realized that he could photograph whenever he wants and whatever he wants, using his style. And in 2012, I have found a style of my style, and I would try to test it. Then I photograph here, I photograph in São Paulo, and then I'm going to Paris to see what happened there. And again, I was alone. I was by myself, and I was not interested in go to Eiffel Tower and Picadero and stuff like that. I was interested in the Paris life, and I saw a lot of Parisians hanging out because it was summer. It was like a holiday there, and the way they manage with the city, the way they deal with the city, for me, very interesting. Maybe because in Brazil we don't have this relationship with the public space, with the city. Sometimes we avoid that because it's the city. The streets are violent and more violent in our minds than it really is, but we have this mindset that streets are territory to be avoided. And you here in New York and in Europe, people see it differently. And the street, the public space, the parks, are places to be enjoyed. And of course, it's a beautiful city. But I was very fascinated by this kind, how they Parisians and how you New Yorkers enjoy the outside. So I could test my style, my view in another city, a big city like Paris.
Some final questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue both that remark that Boca made about how you capture New York and these, like, there's scenes, I mean, we see every day, and we take them for granted, you know. And just this lady walking down, you know, dark, you know, maybe early evening or maybe late. There are no diners, people eating there, and you also captured what you were talking about. Maybe not solitude, but even the loneliness. You know? I just want to ask a question about that particular picture in the corner, the young lady.
Yeah, it's called Young Bardot, Bridget Bardot.
How did you were just walking and just happened to come upon that image? Or?
Yeah, it's a photograph of a painting. And I saw the painting there. That is a painting of Brigitte Bardot. And I stand there and I took the picture like a cage of and like a voyeur, like, oh, I'm here in Paris walking and I found Brigitte Bardot. And she's looking to me and say, Paulo, come here. Like a mermaid. And she looks like a mermaid. Let's see.
Yes.
You talked about using both film and digital. Can you compare it to?
Yes. I started doing film, and then I switched to digital, and 100% of those images are film. Are digital. And for me, the camera is the same. The media is different, but the camera, the whole camera is the same. And I don't like to see what I'm doing when I am photographing on the street. And in my mind, I only have few photographs. I only have few possibilities. I only have 36 exposures, frames. So, but of course I'm not. So I can take some advantages. And I believe that nowadays it's too expensive to photograph with film. Not because film is expensive, but you have to use a lot of water, and you have to use a lot of chemicals and all this stuff. And we're living in hard times for
The environment.
the environment. And in São Paulo there is a great dry period now, and it's tough to take away 30 liters of water for one roll of film. So I think that digital it's okay.
Yes.
So you said you fought over color versus black and white. Can you talk about color versus black and white?
Yes.
Not
Well,
just about your fight, but just your life.
no. First, when I photograph, I'm thinking in black and white because I see the light. The light is the most important to me, and then I see the geometry.
The composition.
The composition. I see the forms. I see the squares, the triangles, the circles, and then I see the color. And the main color for me is the black. So even when I photograph in black and white, I only push the button when I see something in black. And
So even when you're photographing in color, you only...
even when I photograph in color, I think in black and white. And when I know exactly that, no, this is in color, I like to see the black, something black. And I set up the camera for maybe 1-2 stops down, and because I know that the black will be black and the white will be white, and then there's a lot of colors. Of course, I studied some color compositions that you have blues and grays and blues, greens, reds and yellows. I studied color composition, but in my mind, when I'm photographing, I can't remember this. This is inside me in any part that when I see something, I push the button. And then I will realize, wow, here I did exactly what I studied, this color composition called Wheel of Holbrick, something like this. And sometimes it happens, but I like to think in black and white all the time.
Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, I've been fascinated by the use of angles, the geometric structures, and how it's in those two photographs you have the distorted images by the shadows, but yet framed within the geometric structures, which are framed within the very black angular. So it's one structure on top of another structure on top of another structure, and especially the one on the left is the power of the gray as it contrasts with the. I haven't seen a black like that in a long time. Black in photography, you think it's easy to do black. It's not easy to do black. I mean, black is. It's very definite. When you reach the black, it really sets the stage for everything else.
Right. It gives a structure to the composition. Carlos, you had a question.
Well, it's not important so much. I'd like to build on the exchange that you had regarding analog film and digital film. You said too much water, too many chemicals. Curiously, there's a book out called Minamata, and the photographer, his name I forget, but I usually say, well, the poet said, and I can't remember the poet's name, but I'll remember the poem, right? So Minamata, for whatever, I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember his name now. Do you remember his name? But anyway, Minamata was one of the first exposures that we had to environmental pollution in Japan, because it's
Eugene Smith.
Huh?
Eugene Smith.
And right, so Minamata was a village in Japan where children were being born completely deformed, etc. But curiously enough, that what was polluting the river and the fish was a film factory in Japan. They were producing film and dumping all their chemicals into the river. But Minamata is one of the first exposures that we had to environmental pollution, I guess probably some 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yes.
In the back, yeah.
Because you said you work really fast, I'm actually curious to know how much of the work happens after you take your pictures, and do you use the burst? Do you take like multiple pictures and then later on you go for the best? Or how is it? Is it a lot of cropping? Because the composition is really fabulous. This gentleman was saying before, like layers upon layers. And also in that picture, you fooled many people. I was here for the opening, and a lot of people thought like that's actually real live Brigitte Bardot in that picture. And I would say because it has like foreground and background and many layers, so I'm curious to you were saying like you manipulate the light, you bring blacks and whites and whatnot, contrast and everything else. Yeah. But in terms of composition, how much of it is cropping and like happens later on in the lab?
Sometimes I do some crops, but it's not too much to like something that completely changed the image. Sometimes I crop just to because I know that I would like to take a step forward, and I always use, when I photograph on the street, I always use a 50 millimeter lens, and I don't have this zoom resource, so sometimes I crop a little bit, but the most images here, they're not any crop. And I'm looking all the time to the light and to this to these layers. That fascinates me. The layers that I can find on the streets or or even in this picture that is in MoMA. When I saw these layers, lights, and shadows, I said, "Wow, like it's like a playground for me here."
So the composition really is being done through the focal plane.
Yeah, in this picture in MoMA, I stayed there for like 1 minute, and I took 3-4 pictures. But the most here, that one on the subways, the series on the subway, it was only one picture. Because when I took the picture, I'm satisfied. I'm done. I'm going to the next one. And as I told you, I don't look to the camera to see what happened and to see, I could do this more vertically or horizontally. I'm satisfied, and then I go to another one. And this is a kind of exercise that I used to do when I was a beginner, and I kept. And I think that I'm using a 36 millimeter film, 36 exposure film, and that I only have this 36 photographs to take, and I don't spend too much time photographing a scene or something. The exception here is this picture in MoMA where I stand there for 1 minute maybe.
Okay. So
I can see myself telling somebody, "Get the hell out of the way," which I've done on a number of occasions. This is just perfectly. All you need is someone to walk in there, and then you wait that minute for the person to take it out. The light changes, and the moment is gone.
That's why I would like to be a painter, because painters can paint the light and freeze the moment.
I think, as Bill is sort of saying, anyone I think who's creative is spontaneous in a way, and if you put too much thought into it, then you're going to lose it. So it's better just to do whatever you're doing, and then the learning process comes from that, going back and you say, oh, I remember when I did that. But also, I think you're, again, such a tremendous chameleon that you're able to adapt yourself in any city and you really feel like you're from that city. And as Ronnie was saying, these images, which we don't take them for granted, but you've captured them where, and I think a good thing about visual thing is that when I came in, I said, oh yeah, I can also hear what's happening. Like, to me, I get the sound. I see the image, and I can almost hear her walking down the street in the cars. And that's the light from the cars in the back, and the bag movement, and the talking and the restaurants. So here you can also hear things besides seeing. And the graphic is when you walked in. First thing I said, but how'd you do these blacks? It's like a print, and what's archival mineral ink? Because it's like the old master printers. The importance was the black.
Yeah.
When you understand that and you capture the abstract and the figurative, just beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I want to thank everyone who's here, who's joined us, and you've all been very, very patient. Of course, Paulo and I are going to continue to be in the gallery for a bit longer, so any additional questions, feel free to come up to us. And again, thank you, Taller, thank you, Marcos, Nitza, Fernando, and our board president. Thank you very much.
Já acabou?
Acabou.
Só?
Já acabou.
Tava ficando bom.
Take it easy, brother Charlie. my brother Charlie. Take it easy, meu irmão de cor. Pois a rosa é uma flor, a rosa é uma flor.